For the last 10, I've been working on LIMS, primarily focused on STARLIMS. I've worked in various sectors, including public health, genomics, and standards enforcement. Most of my career in LIMS has been spent customizing existing systems and upgrading heavily customized systems. I've been with CSols for the last 5 years, and I'm here today to talk about different ways to customize your existing STARLIMS implementation. Here's the agenda. We'll talk for a few minutes about the first step, which could also be the plural steps. I'll talk about different customization types and techniques and how you might accomplish the same result with different approaches. Then I'll talk through a number of ways to keep your custom elements healthy now and into the future. And throughout, I'll reference a couple of scenarios that demonstrate different levels of engagement and effort. Hopefully, after some final thoughts, we'll have time enough to answer any questions you have. Okay, what's the first step? Making the move to customize an existing LIMS is not that different from your choice to implement one in the first place. You have some needs that are not met, and you need to decide what to do about it. You probably have a few choices you can make about the approach you take, new configuration, new software, or customize what you have. The differences in these options can be stark, but a considered decision on your potential changes should include a discussion of each option. Configuration would include any changes you can make from within STARLIMS according to their documentation and standards. Customization would include any changes you can make within the application designer that may alter almost any part of the application. And including a new third-party software package can take you in any other direction, really. Too many to talk about today. I'll touch on all of these, and with customization, I'll encourage you not to rule it out based on perceiving that it's difficult, especially with respect to upgrades. With one of the most heavily customized systems I've ever worked on, we kept the system at its most up-to-date version and even pushed for pre-release versions when they had features that we needed. So a well-managed system can be customized and maintained. And besides, you probably chose STARLIMS because it's flexible and feature-rich. With that, let's discuss what to consider. You'll need a gap analysis, and that can take many forms of varying effort levels. You'll need to put a project team together, and you'll need to assess your options for implementation. As part of that last piece, I recommend that you consider alternatives to customization before pushing ahead with what could be a significant amount of work. So let's take these one by one. I could have labeled this slide gap analysis, but customization may be a small change, and the notion of doing a full gap analysis might be unnecessary. Really, you need to just identify the stakeholders and interview them to determine the changes that are needed. The analysis should be targeted and will likely be based on requests or other obvious needs. And of course, the limits of the project will always be your budget, so cost benefit has to be part of the process. Putting together your project team can be the most consequential decision you make during the process. When you select a project manager, and we do recommend that you get a dedicated, trained PM, you'll want someone who won't get pulled into the weeds during meetings and will instead seek to clarify and keep the group focused. The PM will manage timelines and budget and generally attempt to keep everyone on task. The next major decision is who will actually do the work. The three major candidate pools are the vendor, STARLIMS, your staff, or an outside consultant. Each has pros and cons that you likely went through during your first implementation. The vendor is knowledgeable and has the best product support and experience, but might be costly. Staff will have institutional knowledge and access, but will lack training and experience in STARLIMS. Consultants tend to fill in all the gaps with a diverse and at times novel or unique experience that can make a big difference. The right one will also have a great deal of experience with STARLIMS. But like internal staff, there will be some amount of ramp up. Likely, you'll be employing 2 or more of these groups in your project team. And finally, either at this stage or sometime before you begin in earnest, you're going to need to define your development process. The two main development options are waterfall or some kind of agile process. Of course, agile has numerous variants like Scrum, Kanban, DSEM, and others, but they all have some similarities when compared with the more traditional waterfall approach. With waterfall, stages of a project are tackled one at a time, where the following stage isn't started until the previous one ends. For example, from requirements gathering to design, build, testing, and release, each step is completed in turn. With an agile process, stages of a project are repeated in sprints or other smaller chunks in order to complete the project in smaller increments. In that way, the end product can be developed in iterations, allowing for more review and understanding throughout the project. Most likely, you will use some hybrid of the two processes, with a development cycle that leverages an agile approach, while the final UAT and validation steps may be controlled in more of a waterfall method. I've worked on projects that have switched more than once, where we started with a lengthy requirements and design phase that were executed in turn, followed by repeated development sprints, and completed by testing and validating in sequence. So there's lots of wiggle room as long as everyone is on the same page. And this is an important consideration with customization of an existing system, because the release will affect existing users in a way your original rollout may not have. Also, the interest of developers will likely be in contrast to your quality or validation personnel. So it's best to work that relationship out. Okay, you've got a team and a process in place, and now it's time to get the real design work done. As part of that work, you need to make choices on how to accomplish your goals. You may be able to leverage existing features, or you might be able to extend or modify existing features to better suit your needs. In the end, you might decide to build a completely custom module or feature to satisfy your requirement. But whatever you decide, it's also a good idea to consider alternatives to customization. You might be able to use an existing module in some novel way. You might also be able to use an external system that's not linked to STARLIMS. Or you might even change your process to fit the capabilities of STARLIMS. Whatever the case, it's a good idea to review any best practices for the work you'll be doing. STARLIMS, as well as any other technology you'll be using, will have established a set of norms for its use. Sticking to best practices will help you to keep your design in keeping with standards and so be more maintainable for the long term.